How's it going, everybody, and welcome back into the SFS channel. My name is Gavin, and today we're going to continue our discussion of 2022 fantasy football and take our first look here on the SFS channel at a rookie mock draft here for the up-and-coming draft class of 2022. Just a precursor and sort of a forward note here before we get into things. This list is going to change a lot throughout this offseason, but these are my current thoughts and opinions. There's still a good chunk of film I could watch on each of these players. I have access to all 22 coaches' film of all 12 of these players I'll be talking about today. Basically their entire season's worth of tape, and I haven't made my way through all of that. But at this point in time, this is my current evaluation, my current opinion of these players' talent. But there is so much more that goes into how we evaluate these players for our fantasy lineups and Dynasty fantasy football. Of course, the NFL draft being the biggest influence on how we ultimately evaluate these players, because situation is such a crucial and pivotal factor in a player's overall potential to succeed. So today, again, I'll be going through my top 12 players, or basically a simulation of the first round of a rookie dynasty mock draft. Let's not waste any time, and let's get right into it. Today's episode is presented to you guys by Manscaped. A big thank you to them for sponsoring today's episode. Manscaped has all of the things you need to get your 2022 started off on the right foot. We're almost into February now, but it's never too late to get started with everything you need for the essentials for your below-the-belt grooming. The Lawnmower 4.0 is my personal favorite product. It keeps me safe. Their anti-nick resistant technology keeps you from having any fatal injuries, again, below the belt. And I love all of their other products. I've had fantastic experience with their shampoo and conditioner, their body wash. It leaves me smelling great after I get out of the shower and freshened up for a new day. So, again, thank you, Manscaped. When you head over to their website, manscaped.com, use promo code SIZZLE for 20% off and free shipping. I don't know what could be much better than that. Again, thank you, Manscaped. Promo code SIZZLE, 20% off and free shipping. All right, here we go. Right off the bat, I want to address the Treylon Burks hype train that has been created here, and all of the obviously large accumulation of fans and players in Dynasty Fantasy Football that are loving the things that he brings to the table for us in our fantasy teams. I just want to say that it is incredibly close in my evaluation right now between Garrett Wilson and Treylon Burks. Again, there is more film for me to watch, and I always am going back, refining things, and watching tape over and over again. But as it stands right now, these two players are neck and neck, and I absolutely love each of their skill sets. I think they are going to each be phenomenal wide receivers at the next level. And I think at the end of the day, for me, what the deciding factor is going to be between Garrett Wilson and Treylon Burks is going to be landing spot. Which team drafts these players? Who is the quarterback for those teams? What does the target competition look like in those NFL rooms that they have to work with? That's going to be what it comes down to. So it's a paper-thin margin right now between Garrett Wilson and Treylon Burks for me at the wide receiver one position. I get it. The physical intangibles and what Treylon Burks brings to the table that you can't teach can't be overstated enough. But to me, Garrett Wilson is my number one receiver. I absolutely love everything the 6 foot, 192-pound wide receiver out of Ohio State brings to the table. He is so agile. After the catch, I see defenders constantly slipping off of him. And from a route running perspective, he has some of the most poised body adjustment on contested catches that I have seen from a college football prospect. I absolutely love the separation as well. He creates miles of separation between some of the best levels of competition at the college football level. Now, Ohio State does not play in the SEC, so technically you're not seeing your Alabamas and your LSUs and those types of NFL producing, college football staples. But there is still a very respectable level of competition in the Big Ten. And I feel like what Garrett Wilson has brought to the table and the production he's shown us while competing with two other very, very impressive wide receiver prospects on his own roster for targets and playing with a true freshman quarterback, CJ Stroud, has been incredibly impressive to me, and that's what ultimately brings him to this number one position. I think that he has all of the intangibles. He's a natural route runner, and I see everything in Garrett Wilson that I look for in a number one NFL receiver. I love the size. He is smaller and a lot less muscular per se than a Treylon Burks, but he's still someone I expect to succeed and see very high levels of success at the NFL level. I think that he could be a long time, 8 to 10 year stud for an NFL franchise. Here at the number two spot, it's not a running back. It is Treylon Burks. And again, I kind of already touched on this, but he is a much larger, physically imposing prospect. But the one thing I don't see with Treylon Burks, and it's not even so much of a knock as it is, I just think that Garrett Wilson is so much more of a natural mover, and his routes are so much crisper and refined. And again, this is not saying in any sense of the imagination that Treylon Burks does not do those things as well. But I don't see as much of the body control with Treylon Burks as I see with Garrett Wilson. Again, he is a physical freak. He does some things I absolutely love to see, and his usage at Arkansas has been in a very positive manner, where he's seeing bubble screens and swing routes underneath that are showing me that his run after catch and ability to produce close to the line of scrimmage is there, and it's a potential for him to be used in that fashion at the next level. Again, for me, think of this as a 1A and 1B situation. Don't look at this as one player over the other at this point in time, because again, I think each of these players is going to be a dominant and fantastic NFL receiver for a very long time, and it's going to come down to, again, that landing spot and that situation that they're placed into on draft night. At number 3 here, I've got Breece Hall, the running back out of Iowa State. He is my number one running back in this draft class. He's got a nice build, 6'1", 220, again, out of Iowa State. And he's not necessarily a powerful runner as much as he is an elusive runner who has patience to find the hole and exploit that hole for nice gains. I think of him almost not so much as a player who has the potential to be a great NFL running back like Le'Veon Bell, but I do see some similarities between the two. He doesn't have breakaway home run speed, but he does have a good enough burst to where I can see him ripping off some larger explosive carries, which are defined as 20 or more yards on the ground. So Breece Hall is someone I really like the skill set he brings to the table. I expect him to be at least the first or second running back taken off the board. And for me, it's going to be that draft capital. And again, that situation he falls into, that's going to be the big determining factor in how we assess him post-draft, because again, this list is going to change in dramatic fashion. Kenneth Walker, in terms of intangibles and skill set, again, that is what today's episode is about, brings him to my number 4 spot. Kenneth Walker is more of a one-cut, home run hitting, explosive runner than a Breece Hall. He's 5'10", 212, so a little bit smaller than the player that Breece Hall is. And again, he is not necessarily a physical runner either, but some of the things I've seen from him have been very, very encouraging on tape. In particular, one game I focused in on in my assessment of Kenneth Walker to this point in time was his game against Michigan. And to me, the fact that he showed up and had such an impressive game and showed up big in so many large spots of that contest against the best of the best competition, that Michigan Wolverines defense was fantastic this year, was very encouraging. Again, in the open field, he is a very tough tackle. He's very hard to track down, and he is someone that is going to be a force to be reckoned with that explosive burst, again, as a one-cut rusher in the National Football League. Isaiah Spiller is my number 5 player here, my number 3 running back on the board. And for me, what this came down to is I see some very nice potential. I see a really nice comp for Isaiah Spiller, but he doesn't have as much of a consistent body of production in the sense of his highs are not as high as the other players I've seen. And that's what makes evaluating college prospects so difficult, because situation in college can be completely and drastically different from one player to another, depending on the conference they're playing and the surrounding pieces around them. There's so many factors that I would say influence a college prospect's situation more so than it even would at the NFL level. But Isaiah Spiller has a nice large frame at 6'1", 215 out of Texas A&M, and his big build almost reminds me a little bit of a Matt Forte. He's more physical than a Breece Hall, but I would say a little bit less elusive than him. He is, again, not someone who I would classify as a true power back, but if an NFL defender were to tackle high or not necessarily bring forth the best technique into the tackle. Isaiah Spiller turns those legs. He fights for extra yardage, and I could see him getting some yards after contact, whereas I don't see him so much as the Javonte Williams, a rookie from this past year's draft class, who is just bowling players over and leading the National Football League in broken tackles. So I see a lot of opportunity here. Isaiah Spiller is also a very quality pass catching back, so I could use him or see him being used in that facet of the game. That's kind of where that Matt Forte comp comes from in terms of the body type, the size, the tall running back build, longer legs, and the ability to, again, catch passes in open space. He's a really interesting prospect. For me, it's going to largely depend on where he lands at and if he's able to find an NFL opportunity to be the lead back. But I do think he possesses some key intangible things to be a productive back at the next level. Kyren Williams here out of Notre Dame is my next running back off the board. My number 4 back overall, a much smaller player than that of an Isaiah Spiller at just 5'9", 198 out of Notre Dame. But this is a player whose skill set was very, very impressive to me. He, based off of the tape I've watched so far, has broken more tackles than Isaiah Spiller has. And he shows more willingness to play a physical brand of football and more grit in the box to push defenders forward. At 5'9", he is still turning those legs, still picking up yards after contact, and showing a very dynamic skill set while doing so. He's a pass-catching back that can scat out of the backfield and be a dangerous weapon out in open space, but he's also someone that can run inside the center and guard the A and B gaps and pick up yardage in that phase of things. So I think that Kyren Williams, again, brings a really nice skill set to the table. And for all of these running backs, I've said it probably 5 times already in this episode, it's going to come down to the draft capital, which team decides to pick which of these players first. Obviously, the higher draft capital a team invests into a player, the more they're probably going to see the field, the more touches they're going to get on Sundays, and the more valuable they'll be to our fantasy teams. But right now, assessing size, skill set, speed, what they could potentially turn into, I think that this is where it falls in place as of right now. Kyren Williams as my number 4 running back and my 6th overall prospect. Again, for the obvious reason, if you haven't, figured this out yet in Dynasty, I guess, the running back position is much more scarce than wide receiver or any other major fantasy football position outside of quarterback in a superflex or 2 QB league. So that's why you see players who could potentially not even be starters day one ranked higher on the list than a receiver who has star potential, just because of how much more difficult it is to find one of those dominant running backs, especially with how short their shelf life is. Jameson Williams is my number 7 prospect here, 6'2", 189 pounds, out of Alabama. Williams, if you had not been made aware of this, suffered that tragic ACL injury against Georgia that obviously is going to cost him some draft stock and potentially lessen the draft capital invested into him by an NFL franchise. That's fine by me, though. I think that the talent has spoken for itself. The production has been there, and we have on tape what we need to see to know that this guy has star potential and has the ability to be a big ceiling asset in our fantasy lineups at the next level. Jameson Williams has been pegged by some as a one-trick pony, a guy who can only win on deeper patterns. And while it's true that that's where the majority of his production has come from at the college level, this is definitely a player who I have seen enough of. The work has not been a high workload, but again, when you're playing with John Mechie and others at Alabama, and obviously having to share targets with Bryce Young under center, but throwing you passes, and there's so many other options on the football field, you're going to have to delegate those looks a little bit. But Jameson Williams underneath has shown me enough to this point in his college career to be comfortable, to be confident in him. He is incredibly explosive, incredibly quick. He doesn't lose any velocity after the catch point. Some receivers you'll see slow down to track the ball, even turning upfield or changing direction. They lose some of their velocity. They lose a step. Defenders are able to catch up to them. That is not Jameson Williams. This guy is incredibly explosive, very sure-handed, and when he catches that ball, it's off to the races. He is a very dangerous target, a very dangerous threat, and I could see him being an absolute steal if he falls down the board on draft day. I would highly suggest against letting that happen in your fantasy leagues. Chris Olave of Ohio State, a second player here from the Ohio State Buckeyes at the wide receiver position. In my top 12 here for Dynasty Fantasy Football at this point in time, I also love Chris Olave's skill set. I would say that he is in a very similar situation outside of having a season-ending injury to Jameson Williams because of the fact that he was more so the field stretcher and deep target for this Ohio State offense. He was not able to see and benefit from the underneath and intermediate targets that a Garrett Wilson was to, or at least not on as frequent of a basis. But Chris Olave is such a smooth route runner. He's actually been nicknamed Mr. Smooth. He is very, very crisp in his route running. He's had some really nice contested catches. And again, that separation is fantastic when running those deeper route patterns. He's not someone who I expect to, and this is getting a little bit into expected draft capital. I would say he's going to be a player who's drafted in the later stages of the first round, maybe even trickling down into the second round of the actual NFL draft. But this is someone who I would keep highly in your sights for your dynasty leagues. I think he brings a lot to the table. And again, there's not as many in-breaking routes on tape as I'd like to see, or at least as many opportunities to catch the football and get moving out in space. But I think that that's something that he can do at the next level. He has the athleticism and the intangibles to make that happen. Maybe it'll take some coaching. Maybe it'll take a little bit of development. But he certainly brings all of the physical traits to the table you look for when finding an athletically, potentially dominant wide receiver. Drake London down here at the number 9 spot. This is someone who I am much lower on at this point in time than some others are. I've seen a lot of other fantasy outlets out there be very high on Drake London. I am currently not one of those people. Again, as I've stated multiple times throughout this video, I am still in the process of evaluating these players and solidifying my long-term stance and opinions on their college football careers and their ultimate upside at the next level. So I don't want to make it seem like I'm overly bashing on Drake London, having him down here at the number 9 spot. But to put it lightly, I'm just simply not overly impressed with the film he has on tape. He's 6'5". I get it. He's 215 out of USC. But when I watched his film, I didn't see an elite level of separation. You talk about a Treylon Burks, a Garrett Wilson, even a Jameson Williams and a Chris Olave. When they're open, they are 4 and 5 yards separated from their college competition. They are flying past defenders, getting wide open deep. Heck, even underneath, they are showing a significant amount of separation from their defenders. Drake London, a lot of his highlights, a lot of his best plays are simply jump ball Moss plays. And it's not that that's not impressive. It's not that that's not great to do in college. But when the margin of error is lesser in the NFL, and I get that there's not 6'5" corners walking around in the NFL matching the hands of guys like Drake London that are going to be able to match his size. But if you're not able to separate at an elite level, or at least at an above average level at the college level, it makes me question and have concerns about your ability at the NFL level. So I need to do some more research, some more digging on Drake London. I get it. Again, the size, it's not like he's just a 6'3" receiver. He is 6'5", so he does go that extra mile. But with that comes a lack of explosiveness. He's not the fastest receiver in this draft, so there's certainly things about his game I'm not overly in love with here. I would like to see, again, more, but at this point in time, I am not bullish on drafting Drake London for my Dynasty fantasy football teams. David Bell is my number 10 player here, another wide receiver out of Purdue. David Bell is not someone who has any one elite characteristic or trait. Rather, he's a player to me that has a very complete game. And obviously, he can continue to build upon and get better and maybe over time develop one of those strengths or many strengths into 1, 2, 3, or a wide variety of elite points in his NFL game. But right now, he's just an overall solid player. This is a guy who brings a lot to the table. He is kind of a guy where you start to talk about him a little bit less as a team's number 1 receiving option and look at him more as someone who could be a really nice complementary piece, a number 2 guy. If you want to talk about a guy who I see emerging into that role right now, who has certainly taken his tools and traits to the next level and could potentially have a massive ceiling next year, think about a Stephon Diggs as the A target, and then you've got Gabe Davis starting to step forward as a really, really solid number 2 piece for that Buffalo Bills offense. I could maybe see one day David Bell, and he's not exactly comparable to a Gabe Davis, but that's kind of the role I see him playing on an NFL roster, being a really good B option, a second player for a quarterback to throw the football to. Again, he's got really nice intangibles. He's got some pretty solid route technique. He's got really good body awareness. I like his movement in the open field. He's not a super dynamic or an elite athlete, but again, I think that his play just meshes really well together. And he's a player that doesn't really have too many holes or flaws in his game that, point themselves out to me at this point in time. George Pickens here, another receiver out of Georgia. Pickens is now where we start to get into, I would say, another tier of players. This is where I start to become a little bit less excited, and I will say right now, as we get into the last two players in the list, I left quarterbacks out of the rankings for today's episode. So the way I kind of assessed these were standard 1 QB fantasy leagues, half PPR scoring is the basis we keep here at the SFS channel. By the way, if you're new around here, thank you so much for tuning in. Click that subscribe button, turn the bell on so you're never late for an episode, and feel free to join the community Discord server to interact with myself and other Dynasty players and talk through all of your offseason roster building strategies with me and, again, others this offseason. But I left quarterbacks alone and did not include them in today's episode. First of all, you've probably heard it if you're playing Dynasty Fantasy Football. This is a weaker quarterback class. This is not a QB class that has a highly revered prospect, someone that is extremely respected already in NFL circles and expected to be a life-changing player at the next level. With that being said, I don't know if I want to buy into that just yet. There is a lot of research, effort, and attention to detail that needs to be made to truly assess the quarterback position. It is, in my opinion, truly the most difficult position to evaluate in professional sports, and I think that there's a lot beneath the surface that needs to be investigated as well. And to this point, I think that, and I'm just going to talk in general terms here, I think that you can assess and get a good feel for what a player's strengths and weaknesses are by watching a brief sample of tape, and that's something that I don't necessarily want to do because I want to do in-depth research and have all of the important need-to-know information for each one of these prospects. But with that being said, it's a lot easier to get the feel for what a running back does well by watching a 10-15 minute highlight reel of what he does. And again, that's not something that I'm recommending you do to formulate your basis for analysis here. But with quarterback in particular, this is really the point I'm trying to make here, is that I highly, highly advise against doing that for the quarterback position. It is incredibly dangerous to formulate your opinion of an incoming NFL quarterback prospect by simply watching a highlight tape video. That is something you absolutely cannot do because those highlight tapes are a quarterback with above average arm talent just throwing bombs over a defense for 60 yards over and over and over again to the point where it becomes numbing. You just honestly fall asleep because you're watching the same thing over and over again. To get a true sense for what a quarterback can be at the next level, you've got to watch that coach's tape. You have to watch the skybox view, see the entire field, see what the quarterback is seeing, and watch every snap of that game to get a feel for how he handles the run game, how he handles the short, intermediate, deep passing game. Are his targets on time? Does he deliver them on target? There are so many things that you have to take into consideration, and a large part of it as well is things that are not just talent-based, but also personality and character-based as well that require even more digging. So the point here is that quarterback is an extremely complex position to not only assess, but obviously evaluate for draft positioning, and I do not feel confident enough at this point in time to put forth my opinions on those players because of how much detail I believe is truly needed in your scouting to put together a strong formula and basis of information to actually put out informational content to you guys, my viewers. So that's something that I want to strive to highly avoid here. And in particular, the quarterback position in 1 QB leagues is going to be valued much lesser. So I think it's fairly safe to say that they would be lower on this list or potentially off the list completely, regardless of how I was feeling about the quarterback position at this time. But no, that's something that I'm looking a lot deeper into. I have already obviously watched a quality amount of film for each of the guys in this year's draft class, but what I'm telling you is there's a whole lot more that needs to be done before that information can be accurate. So, or at least as accurate as I could make it from myself, the creator, to you, which is what I strive to do, is to give you guys the best information that I have accessible and available to me. So a very long-winded break there in the mock draft. But George Pickens here, this is a wide receiver who, to me, you want to talk about a one-trick pony. I'm not ready to, slap that name tag on him, but this is where we're starting to get into players who I think have a much more specialized skill set and are less all-around well-rounded players. George Pickens is someone who can stretch the field. He's got burners. He can beat you over the top. He can score long touchdowns. And it didn't play to his benefit that Georgia isn't the most explosive over-the-top offense in terms of producing elite skill position players in the production category. But I do think he's a very athletic player at 6'3", 200 pounds. With the speed, the burners he has, I think he has a lot of potential at the next level. But again, I think that he's a lot less refined in those intermediate and underneath routes than some other players in this draft. So he falls down here at the number 11 spot for me. And then at number 12, a player who I see as someone who could potentially be a diamond in the rough pick here for this upcoming draft class. I've seen his name tossed out there by some other fantasy outlets as well, and he was a very interesting player to check out. I really liked what I saw from him. Rachaad White out of Arizona State is someone who has bounced around in JUCO teams and eventually found his way here to Arizona State. He is not a junior like most of the players on the list were today. We do have a couple of seniors, I believe, including Chris Olave, who stayed for a senior season. But Rachaad White is an older rookie coming into the draft here. Think about Ramondre Stevenson, kind of a similar, not exactly the same, but a similar path to the NFL through Oklahoma. He was a rookie, came out last year, played for the Pats this season, had some nice games. Rachaad White is a big physical player who I think has the potential to be a high-volume player if given the opportunity at the next level. At 6'2", 210, he can put his shoulder down and win and make yards after contact. He does have a very respectable three-down skill set. He can do some work catching the football. And again, he can be a player who I think if coached up and put in the right position to succeed, could be a productive player if given enough touches. One of the things that I've noticed when watching his tape is that often I feel like the run is directed to be, whether it's an inside zone play, a power play, Rachaad White will tend to bounce the play off tackle and then scamper out of bounds as opposed to cutting up the field and following the path of his blockers. And that's something that obviously a stickler head coach like a Bill Belichick, for instance, who I wouldn't expect to draft Rachaad White, although they do love having a stable of 3 to 5 running backs with all sorts of different skill sets. But that is something that could drive some head coaches nuts, so that's something to watch at the next level. But he does have the physical intangibles. He's not exactly a home run hitter, but he is someone who's shown me explosiveness and burst in the open field to make big plays. I think there's an opportunity here to have someone with high upside. And again, Rachaad White could fall off the map of my rankings if he doesn't land in a situation like either as a team starter, which I find unlikely, or in a situation like San Francisco, Miami, one of those teams that just has a revolving door at the running back position that really anyone has a fair chance and opportunity to become the starter and get the workhorse level of carry. So Rachaad White rounding out the list today, my number 12 running back, my number 12 prospect here, the final pick in the first round per se here of this rookie dynasty mock draft. If you guys enjoyed today's video, a big thank you to you guys for sticking with me and staying tuned the entire time here. Again, make sure to click that subscribe button if you're new around here. Drop any comments down in the comment section below. Questions, concerns, whatever you got for me about your dynasty leagues. Again, please go check out that community Discord server. We're looking to continue to grow that thing up and get you guys joining the conversation and getting involved with Dynasty this offseason. I would love to grow my platform and my audience for that phase of fantasy. Is it something I'm trying since I have the opportunity and obviously the resources to do a lot of great stuff in that phase of fantasy football to improve our content and the product we give to you guys this offseason here in 2022. So again, thank you guys so much for watching. Stick around for the next episode, and I'll see you guys there. Peace out.